India are moving. Moving beyond the territories of oppression and subjugation. A process which perhaps began with the freedom struggle. Women's movements today are redefining any discourse if their identity, dignity, and rights are compromised. There is no single unified women's movement in India. There are diverse issues. Therefore, there are diverse women's movements. But all these movements have led to the rise of dynamic women leaders. Their approach may be different, but there is definitely one concern which brings them together: how to restore women's self-respect and social well-being. Environmentalist and physicist Vandana Shiva, social activist Beena Sebastian, and feminist writer and publisher Urvashi Butalia may not be traversing the same path, but they're all pioneers in their respective domain in building people's movement, effectively negotiating with the urgent concerns of women. They're relentlessly struggling both at local and global level to draw the attention of the world, most emphatically to the questions of women's dignity, rights to livelihood, and access to resources which together would give women the real sense of freedom.
We've learned our lessons. We know how to defend our freedoms. Our world is not for sale.
I got deeply involved in the Chipko movement. After all, this is my home. The forests of these mountains is where I have grown up. My father used to be a forest conservator, and every vacation of mine was spent with Chipko from the mid-70s to 1981, when we got the logging ban on the high Himalayan forests. It continued to be a holiday activity till the Ministry of Environment asked me to do a study on the mining in Dehradun. And as a result of that study, the Supreme Court banned the mining. I realized that if in a short study for environmental causes, I could save an entire valley, a valley that was my birthplace, it made sense to spend a little more time on working on ecological research connected to grassroots community, and started to focus my ecological concerns on agriculture, where there wasn't an ecology movement, not in India and not anywhere in the world.
Not being put on that, we're going to get them.
आजकल सब लोग मौसम बदलाव की बात कर रहे हैं. हम यहाँ बैठे हुए एक्सपीरियंस भी कर रहे हैं. ऐसी गर्माई होनी नहीं चाहिए इस वक्त देहरादून में, पर है. क्यों हो रही है? हमारे नवदान्या का I started the Navdanya movement intellectually in the mid-80s when I experienced the violence of the dominant form of agriculture. So I did my big study on Punjab. It eventually came out as the book called The Violence of the Green Revolution. And as a result of that book, I started to get invited to conferences. 1987, the new technologies were being introduced. The big industry that had brought the chemicals was now promising to bring genetically engineered crops. But they also wanted patents on seed, and they wanted the right to trade with no restriction. I found this ethically abhorrent. I found it a violation to the integrity of the beautiful creation and universe that we had received. I knew this would spell disaster for our farmers. And I thought deep in my heart, I said, what does one do when what is being introduced is a dictatorship over life itself? If Gandhi could fight imperialism of his time by bringing out a charkha and spinning cloth to say we will not be dependent on you and your mills for our survival, I thought the spinning wheel of today was a little seed. And I started to save seeds. That's how Navdanya was born. That's when I thought it was important to create a seed bank like this and start a farm where farmers could come, visitors could come and recognize the value of diversity.
And today Navdanya articulates a deeper vision of freedom, beginning with the freedom of the seed, the freedom of food, and the freedom of water and the land.
मैं बहुत खुश हूँ। आज 5 लाख से ज़्यादा किसान जुड़े हुए हैं जैव विविधता संरक्षण में, जैविक खेती में और जैविक बाजार में।
किसान जो है, किसान स्वावलंबी तब होगा जब उसके पास अपना बीज होगा।
And we have totally closed the cycle now. Starting with the seed, we went to organic farming, and when farmers became organic, they said, but we want to have a different kind of market that brings us a fair price and respects our work. So we created the just market and a fair market. And seed to table now, Navdanya works to bring quality food to people that is safe, grown and cooked with care, and is good for the planet, good for the farmers, and good for our health. The connection between women and ecology, and women and nature, in my view, in my worldview, is an ecological connection. In the eyes of capitalist patriarchy, there's a relationship between women and nature which is essential in form, it is dominating in form, it exploits both. In my vision of the relationship, both nature and women are creative forces of the world. They are protective forces of the world, and they are connected because they give us life.
जंगल तो हमारा और पानी और जंगल तो हमारा बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। औरतों के लिए तो सबसे ज़्यादा है, जंगल से लकड़ी नहीं होगी तो चूल्हा कहाँ से जगाएगी, घास नहीं होगी तो चारा पत्ते कहाँ से देगी। तो महिलाएं के लिए तो ये सबसे पहले है, जंगल बचाना, वृक्षारोपण करना।
We launched the Chipko movement to prevent cutting of our trees. We women led the movement because jungle is our lifeline and we cannot separate ourselves from the nature. If we see jungle being destroyed or any harm done to trees, it deeply wounds our heart.
The commons are the common spaces that we need for survival and for sustenance. Traditional law in India, the Roman laws, have all recognized that things that are vital to life must stay in the common. They cannot be privatized. They cannot belong to the powerful alone. Traditional knowledge is a commons that must be defended as the common heritage of the country. I have been fighting against this privatization through biopiracy.
हमारी दादी नानी से हमें ज्ञान मिला कि नीम को डालो तो कीटाणु मरते हैं, नीम की दातून कर सकते हो, नीम तेल लगाओ तो बीमारी खत्म होती है। तो हम आपको क्यों दें इस ज्ञान के लिए रॉयल्टी? ये आपका नहीं है आविष्कार। नीम वाली लड़ाई आप जानते हो हम कितने साल लड़े? 11 साल।
I find in a biotechnology journal a claim, an article that said the world's first neem biopesticide invented by a company called Grace. Neem was our everyday use. To have an American corporation claim its invention was an outrage. At home, took the issue to every movement, and we collected 100,000 signatures to stop this biopiracy. And then I contacted groups internationally, particularly in United States and Europe where these patents were held. Now in the United States, the patent office said, we can't entertain this challenge unless you have a commercial interest personally. We said, no, we are fighting this for our society and our traditions. And they said, so sorry, our laws don't even allow a challenge to a patent on any ground other than competition between commercial firms. But in the case of Europe, it was a little different. There was a clause in the laws on public morality, on ethics. It took us 11 years to fight that case and win it. In the case of Basmati, I went to the place where Rice Tech, the company, had patented the rice. It's based in Texas. I found women in Texas to go on a protest to the company. And then we started a huge postcard and internet campaign which said, to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, if you do not fully revoke this patent, we will have to rename you the United States Piracy and Theft Office. It embarrassed the Patent Office so much that they were forced to strike the patent down. And in the case of the wheat patent, when we found out an old wheat variety had been patented, we made a challenge along with Greenpeace. And when I went back to the European Patent Office, the head came out to receive me at the gate and shook my hand and said, "It's such a pleasure to see you again, Dr. Shiva." And I said, it's not a pleasure for me because I think it's a terrible shame that we have to keep coming to strike down patents that should never be given by your offices. What kind of a patent system do you run that you treat piracy as invention? I hope this is the last time I will have to visit. They are revisiting their patent laws to stop biopiracy. They realize something has gone totally wrong to allow this. In India, we have managed to put a clause in our patent law that says no patenting of traditional knowledge, no biopiracy will be allowed. So, just with a handful of colleagues, big broad-based reach to movements, and lots of determination, we have made a difference to the discussion on intellectual property.
I was very much attracted by the principles of Gandhi's ahimsa and non-violence, and I was much drawn into this because I have seen very many women and children who are struggling and straining for their very survival within their own families. So I was thinking myself, what should I do in this situation to extend a support or hand to such women who are in crisis situations, such children who are in crisis situation. That actually motivated me to start Cultural Academy for Peace and Sakhi Shanti Bhavan and our community village integrated development programs. There are hundreds and thousands of voiceless women and children in our society. So we as a group, as a voluntary group, we came together to give voice for the voiceless, especially voiceless women. I'm not seeing it as a career, but as my duty and my responsibility to help or devote myself to the underprivileged brothers and sisters in the community. So we've realized that we need to raise our voice to give support to such voiceless women. And the women who have attempted suicide but failed, and they have been tortured and tormented, and they have spent sleepless nights together, And at the end, the children, they just take their hands and they bring their mothers out of their homes and telling that, Mama, come, let us go and save our life. Such women and children are coming to our centers.
I was married 12 years ago. My husband used to torture me physically and mentally. Later, he abandoned me and my children. There was nobody to look after us. I lost all hopes and felt like killing myself and both my children. Then we came to Sakhi for shelter. Here Beena madam consoled me and helped me to find a suitable job. Now I feel confident and desire to live, not die.
When we talk about gender, actually in Kerala situation, people ask, why you're talking about gender? That is something connected with women only. So that is the idea people are really even still having about gender or gender sensitivity. So we have taken initiative actually to mainstream gender or to give gender sensitivity programs in every levels. Ellarkum Adhyame Cultural Academy for Peace Lake Swagatham. Our movement is a people's movement actually. We try to bring in more women and men who have time and space to come and raise their voice or to be with women who are voiceless. We always try to address the victims as well as the perpetrators.
There can't be peace if there is injustice. There can't be justice unless you give women an opportunity to share in the activities of the nation and to make a dignified living. I have come here and sat here only for the sake of speaking a few words in honor of women, for the cause of women and the contribution she has made and all her supporters. This team has created a cadre which works for women's welfare, women's strength.
Earlier, my family situation was such that I was totally confined to home. Then I attended a training program on physical and mental health organized by Cultural Academy for Peace. There I also learned how to interact with the outer world. Beena madam always inspires us to work for positive change. Presently, I am working as an animator for the organization. Now I am financially secure. It is a very encouraging change for a woman like me, who was otherwise confined within the four walls.
We consider her as a prophetess, In the Christian tradition, a person is called a prophet when the person feels that he or she has a commissioning from God. She is doing her service to all sectors of the community without any difference between caste or creed or religion.
We are seeing that women all over the world are facing violence one way or the other, either by war or by domestic violence or by racial discrimination. So such situations, women are really helpless. Women need to break their silence and must come out from the cocoons. Especially we are within the cocoon and we are not yet broken actually the cocoons.
I was born in a place called Ambala. My parents, they are both partition refugees. We moved to Delhi in 1961.
When you were born, there two things happened. My mother-in-law was very unhappy because one daughter is more than enough. And she said,
mother-in-law being BG.
BG, saas meri, teri dadi. तो वो कह रही थी कि दो लड़कियां क्या करनी है, एक ही लड़की काफी होती है, दो लड़कियों के बाप के सिर पे तो बोझ पड़ जाता है.
So what did you say then? Mama, you have to speak in English.
No, then Daddy said okay. Then I told Daddy, I said nothing doing. If you give away my child, I'll commit suicide. So that threat I think worked because then after that he never thought of giving you away to anybody.
At home, my mother has always been something of a feminist, although she wouldn't necessarily at that stage have called herself that. At home, my grandmother used to live with us, my father's mother. And she was a rather wonderful but very traditional woman. So we always had this thing of, pehle ladkon ko khilana aur phir apne bete ko khilana, and then the girls got fed last of all. And we used to get the least amount of stuff. So we used to feel a strong sense of anger and injustice. And my mother always battled that. But you realize that by doing things like that, you acted like a role model for many of us.
Maybe, I don't know.
India's first feminist publishing house is Kali for Women, which we started. I was one of the co-founders of it in 1984 here in Delhi. And by that, I mean that when I was thinking of setting up Kali, it was to set up a publishing house that focused on works on and by women, that built up a body of knowledge about women. Because what was happening actually was that the women's movement was really growing, and within the movement there was a lot of thinking on issues such as, for example, dowry, rape, the kinds of issues that were preoccupying us. There was a lot of research and there was a lot of writing, but none of the mainstream publishers took that seriously at all. They didn't think women had anything to say, they didn't think there was anything serious in what they said. And I was at the time working in a mainstream publishing house. And I just thought, I tried to persuade my bosses to actually publish books about women, but they weren't that interested. And finally I thought, well, it's time to do it myself.
One of the issues that came up fairly early on in the women's movement is not only that we have to do resistance and that we have to do campaigns against various forms of oppressions that women were experiencing, but I think the importance of both women's studies, a way of understanding what was happening to women, a need to put women at the center of knowledge and to produce knowledge. So a first feminist publishing was also clearly something that was related to the needs of the women's movement.
But they just, I don't think they have necessarily forthcoming. But see, they have...
See, Zuban is now 5 years old. It's a child of Kali, that's what I like to say. Basically, when we set up Kali, we worked for nearly 20 years on as a team publishing books in the name of Kali. And then we decided to go our separate ways, and because the two co-founders, we wanted to do something slightly different, each one of us. So I set up Zuban, and Zuban is basically a publishing house that continues the work that Kali was doing, which is publishing books on and by women. But in Kali, we published books which were academic books and a little bit of the more general book, fiction and so on. In Zuban, we have expanded this much more. We bring out books about young adults or for young adults, books for children. But also, what we try to do is to reflect the ways in which the women's movement itself has grown in this country and the ways in which what one might call feminism has also expanded and developed. Being a feminist publisher carries with it a political connotation of believing in something broad called feminism, which bases itself on the battle against patriarchy, the battle for women's rights and so on, and we see ourselves as very firmly located within that. Being a women's publisher can mean publishing anything and everything to do with women, which reaches out to women and which women write. So it could be publishing reactionary stuff, it could be publishing right-wing stuff, it could be publishing very anti-woman stuff, even if it is written by women or it is catering to women. And let me give you an example. These Mills and Boon romances, which are romance novels written for a female audience all over the world, they do nothing for establishing women's rights. They basically reinforce the status quo by building up this story of the handsome man, the very shy female woman. I would not publish books like that. To me, that is the difference between a feminist publisher and a women's publisher. all over the world, feminist publishing has grown out of the women's movement in the same way that it has here in India, in the sense that the concerns and issues that were raised in women's movements are the concerns and issues that were first reflected in women's publishing.
ये हाथ राक्षस जैसा लग रहा है, पर ये हाथ हमारे समाज में पितृसत्ता की पहचान के रूप में है। हमारे समाज में आदमी चाहे जिस रूप में भी हमें नचा सकता है।
I don't think the women's movement in India is at all confined only to a few educated urban women. I think what happens is that those are the women who are the most visible, they are the women who are the most articulate, and therefore the media who covers the women's movement sometimes makes it seem as if the movement is limited only to those. But if a poor woman is battling against some violence or something in her village, nobody's going to talk about that. And yet that is where the women's movement is really located. So I think it's a much bigger thing than what you see. What you see is only the tip of the iceberg. It's very easy to be a publisher who publishes only middle-class writers and who reaches out to a small, elite, middle-class audience. We don't want to be that kind of publisher. This book was produced by 75 village women in a set of workshops. And then they brought it to us and asked us if we would publish it for them. And we did, and they had a condition with us, case, the price of this should be kept really low, so that village women could use it. And so we did that, and since we published it, now thousands and thousands of copies of it have been sold to village women. So in that sense, it's a book that no other publisher would have done, because it's not commercially viable. But we did it because we had a commitment to women's issues. Last year, we published this wonderful book, Baby Haldar's autobiography, called A Life Less Ordinary. Baby is a domestic servant or a maid who works in a house as a domestic worker. She had taught herself to read and write with the help of her employer, and she wrote this book in which she talks about her very difficult life as a child bride, being married at the age of 14 and then being in a violent relationship and so on. We tracked her down and found the book, and I just loved it. I loved it for what it was doing, but I loved it for who she was. A poor woman working in a house as a domestic help, somebody who would never have the chance to write and who would never have the chance to be read. And so we decided to publish the book, and I liked it so much that I decided to translate it. And through that English translation, Baby's voice has now reached out extremely widely. It's now an international bestseller. It's translated into over 20 languages, 8 in India and the rest abroad. And she is now known as a wonderful international writer.
मेरा किताब पढ़ के बहुत औरत को बहुत कुछ मिला है, बहुत मतलब वो लोग फ़ोन पे बात करते हैं, फ़ोन करते हैं, चिट्ठी लिखते हैं, जो आपका किताब पढ़ के मुझे ऐसा लगता है जो मैं कुछ करूं, मुझे भी कुछ करने का इच्छा होता है। हर एक औरत ने मेरा किताब पढ़ के कहानी लिखे हैं, तो ये सब सुन के मुझे भी अच्छा लगता है, जो मैंने अच्छा ही किया इस तरह से लिख के।
Suddenly they feel they're not speaking in a vacuum, they're not thinking in a vacuum. What they're thinking has a space, needs to be said. And our job is to convey that, from the author to the readers. The author has something to say, the readers want to hear it. If we can convey it in the best possible way, we can help in this process of empowering the writer and providing a space for women.
जिस लोगों के सामने मैं खड़ा हो नहीं पाती थी, वो लोग मुझे अपने यहाँ बुला के पास में बैठा के बहुत सम्मान से प्यार देते हैं, बहुत सम्मान देते हैं।
अब तो बड़े-बड़े पब्लिशर आपके पीछे पड़ जाएंगे, कहेंगे ये तो
नहीं, जो भी पढ़ेंगे तो सबसे पहले तो मेरा जुबान उर्वशी बुटालिया है, उसके बाद देखा जाएगा।
These women have been sensitive enough to listen to the notes of agony and anguish pounding in the hearts of oppressed and marginalized women of India. Through their work, we witness the unseen shackles of the sanctuary loosening their grip on Indian women, the wilderness disappearing, the sound of a new music composed by the women, shaking your self and soul beyond belief. A new era of enlightenment and empowerment is taking shape. Now, collectively, they can assert their rightful place and dignity in society and democracy.